In problem 22.3, we're talking more about variances. And so this is going to walk us through a direct material variance, a direct labor variance, and a factory overhead variance. And there's two different ways to approach these. One of them is just the formulas. You'll notice in your book that each formula that's asking for, the direct material variance, quantity variance, price variance, all that stuff. There's a formula for it, and those are great. If you like the formulas, they're nice, especially if you have kind of like a cheat sheet that you can reference. It makes them very quick to do. The other way to do it is how I'm going to do it here, which I prefer it this way because you don't have to memorize any formulas. If you can just understand the setup, you can do any of the variances because it's all mapped out. And so if when you're going to go in and do something like a CPA exam or something like that where you can't have notes, this is the way that you want to do it. However, if you have access to a formula, that's fine too. So just depending on how you think, how you like to do it, you can do it either way. I think this is better to conceptually understand how it all comes together. So that said, let's jump in. So we have Mackinac processes base chemicals into plastic, and we have for direct materials, labor, and overhead, we have their standard cost, and we have their actual cost, and we need to prepare and calculate the variance. So the way this is laid out is we have our actual minus our standard. And then what happens in the middle, we have our flexible budget. And what the flexible budget does is that lets us isolate the price and the quantity. So if we just take our total actual minus our total standard, we'll get our total variance. But as you'll see, when we factor in the standard budget, we're able to pare it down to how much of that is related to price and how much related to that is quantity. So for the direct material variance, let's plug in our actuals here. So they have an actual quantity of 118,500, and that's at 325. So we just multiply those together to get the actual cost. And then we go over here to standard, and so the standard was 120,000 at 320. So now we multiply those together. And so just based on that, we can get our total variance. We just take our actual minus our standard, and we get our total variance. Now, the actual is higher, so that's going to be an unfavorable variance. So now we can plug in the info for our flexible budget. So the flexible budget takes the actual quantity from over here, and it takes the standard price from over here. And that's to give us our flex budget number. So now what that does is we're going to compare the actual to the flexible budget. Well, our actual quantity is the same. So the only thing that varies here is the actual price, giving us the price variance. So we just take and subtract our actual minus our flex budget. Same thing with our quantity variance. So now we're both using the standard price in both of these, but we're isolating the quantity portion, which gives us our quantity variance. So we take our flex budget, subtract left to right from the standard, and then we'll get our quantity variance. And so our price variance was unfavorable because we spent more, but we actually had less quantity, so hey, that's a good thing. So that's a favorable variance. So while our total variance was only 1,000, we actually had two very different opposing things going on. We didn't do so good when it came to price, but we did do good when it came to managing our quantity. So next we can do our direct labor budget, and so that we're going to set it up essentially the same way. So we have our quantity in hours. Our actual quantity is 11,700 at $25, and our standard was 12,000 hours at $24.40. Multiply those together there. Multiply our standard together here. Then carry over our quantity for our flexible budget. Then carry over our price for our standard. And that will give us our flexible budget. So now we can calculate our price variance. So actual minus our flex budget, 70/20, and then our quantity variance is our flex budget minus our standard. And so one thing to note as you're doing these, you'll notice I did the total variance differently in both of those. You can do it either way. The thing to watch out for is if you want to, you can calculate your total variance by subtracting the total actual and the total standard. So this is a actual minus standard. Where on the direct labor budget, and you could do it either way on either one of them, instead of taking the actual and subtracting the standard, we already calculated the variances, so I just added the two variances together. So if we did that like we did above, we'd come out to the exact same number. So all right, so the last thing it asks for is the overhead cost variance. And so the overhead variance is just a little bit different. Same principle, but just the initial setup is just a little bit different because we're dealing with fixed and variable cost here. So for actual, we have, instead of quantity and price, we just have fixed and variable. And so instead of multiplied, we're adding them together. So we have actual fixed cost of 150,000 and actual variable cost of 91,200. So we can add those together. And for our standard, so it says that the standard, how we apply, so the standard is also is the overhead that we actually applied. Actual is the overhead that we incurred. So the standard quantity overhead is applied based on direct labor hours. And so you can see up here we had 12,000 as a standard for direct labor hours. Now for the price, we had a variable price and a fixed price. So we're going to do our 8 plus our 10 here. And so then we want, for our flex budget, we're going to have our fixed cost of 150,000. And then we want our total variable standard cost. And so what's a little different here is we're looking at just the variable portion of $8 times our standard quantity to get us our total variable cost there. So our total flex budget cost is 246,000. All right, so to get our price variance, which is the controllable, what we can control, we just take our actual minus our standard, or sorry, actual minus flex budget, because what we did is we used the same fixed amount, so those cancel each other out. So we just isolated the price variance there. So it's kind of the same process that we worked through above. Get our number standard here. So to get our quantity or volume variance, now we just subtract out our flex minus our standard. And so our price variance was less, so that's favorable. Our quantity variance was more, that's unfavorable. And then we can add our two variances here to get 25,200. And so that's going to be an unfavorable variance. It looks like I didn't add the unfavorable favorable up here. So price variance was unfavorable, quantity was favorable, and overall it was favorable. Perfect. And so like I said, you can do this either way. You can either set it up in this format if that makes sense, or you can go through and just memorize the formulas as well. You'll get to the exact same place.